So this screencast will discuss observational methods, and again, I'm going to present it in this visual instead of running the slideshow regularly, although I will have to run a slide show shortly, but you'll see what I mean. Okay, observational methods. Very useful if you don't quite know what you're doing and what questions to ask. If I want to survey people or interview people and I don't know what to ask them, good luck. I'm going to have a tough time doing that. But if I want to study whatever the topic is, I can just go out and watch people. Watch them. If I want to study crowd behavior or students or parties or whatever it is, I can go to places where the crowds, the students, the parties, and watch and observe. So it's not only good when you don't know what to ask, but it is good if you don't know what to ask. And it also, another bonus is it lets you see things as they really happen. If I want to study crowds, I go out and study a crowd and I see crowd behavior as it really happens instead of asking people what they did or what they do when they're in crowds. So when you're doing observational methods, you have some choices to make. Slide 19. Let's talk about these first here. You can, up here is you're doing everything they do. And down here is you're doing nothing, you're just watching. And then here you have some middle ground. You're more so doing, but you're also watching. And here you're mostly watching with a little bit of doing. So what do you do? If you're studying in crowds or gangs or athletes, whatever you're studying, do you do what they're doing? I mean, if you do, if I'm studying crowds and I'm pretending to be part of a crowd, and how do I take notes or how to record things? If I'm down here and I'm just recording and watching and not doing, am I going to develop a bond enough with them to maybe let them want to have me study them? So you have to make a decision. Are you going to be more on the participant side, somewhere in the middle, or more just observer? You choose what you think is appropriate. That's one choice you have to make. Another one is overt, covert. Overt, are you going to tell people you're studying them? Or covert, are you going to lie about it? So if I am, let's say right here in this cell right here, that means people know I'm studying them, and whatever they're doing, I'm involved in doing it too. I'm over here, I'm doing what they're doing, but they think I'm someone else. Let me give an example. Commonly, I've seen or read of research where you want to study why people join religious cults. They're often right in this cell right here. They pretend to be a new convert to the movement, but they don't tell people that they're studying them. So is that ethical? Well, I've heard people argue yes. I've heard people argue no. Yes, because you're lying to people. No, it is not unethical because you're really seeing how things happen and the way they happen. So it's your call. Do you tell people do you tell people you're studying them? If so, you're being overt. Do you not tell people they're being studied? If so, you're being covert. Your call. You use what's called purposive sampling because it's, if I want to study a certain group of people or a certain place, it's tough to do it randomly. You just go and find out wherever that thing is you need to study it, and you go. Okay, this is the slide that in order to answer the question I have to run the slideshow. So here we go. What do you think? Perhaps, and this is how it was phrased in the text I used to use, so let me use it this way. Perhaps the hardest thing is what? Well, if I hit the page down key, that goes away and so on, and recording the data. Okay, there's your answer. Why? Well, if I go to the next slide, you'll see, well, there's no answer. The reason is with observational methods is, especially if you're doing some more participant stuff, is how do you record stuff? If I'm involved in studying a gang and I'm doing it, say over here covertly, how do I record the stuff without drawing attention to myself or suspicion? So it certainly can be very difficult recording the data. I mean, if you are in this column here, it's easier because they know you're studying them, but still, if you're doing stuff over here with them, how do you stop and take notes or carry the recorder around or what have you? It can be difficult. It can be difficult. Validity. We've talked about validity earlier on. Validity deals with studying what you say you're going to study. So if I want to study intelligence, I better ask you things that really do measure your intelligence. So let's examine a couple different types of validity. First, we'll do internal, then we'll do external. So when you do some interviews, observations in this case, you need to worry about what's called internal validity. So here we go. Then there are three parts to it. If you have any of these problems, then you don't have internal validity. In other words, if you have these problems, then what you're doing isn't going to yield some good results. So are there are there reactive effects? In other words, is your presence influencing how they behave? I call it like a first date syndrome. How are you on your first date? Many times we behave very differently than when we're on a 12th, 18th, 20th date. We put that better foot forward. Similar with observations, especially if people know that you're studying them. If they know you're studying them, they probably won't behave as they normally would. So they're reacting to you. So these reactive effects mean you don't have internal validity, and what you're finding really isn't true. Selective perceptions. How do you, or let's talk about both of them, physical limitations, selective perceptions. How do you record it all? How do you see it all? What do you notice? Maybe you're being a little selective. Maybe you like people with red hair or don't like people with red hair. So you pay attention to them more or less. How do you record things? There's certainly going to be some problems. So if I'm studying a crowd of 50, but I'm only focusing on 6 people, what about the other 44 people? I'm not collecting data on them. So if people are reacting to my presence, and or if I'm being selectively perceptive, or if I'm having problems recording everything, that's going to give me some problems, and the data I collect won't be valid or really accurate. Now, how do you overcome these issues? Well, try and research people over a period of time. Try and reduce your biases. Get a video recording machine or use your phone or something like that. But these 3 things here will limit the accuracy, the correctness, the truthfulness of what you're studying. Because if I think I'm studying people and getting how they really are, but they're really just reacting to me, then I'm going to have some problems. External validity deals with generalization. Is what I found during my observations, for example, is it true in the real world? It's one thing for me to study a group of 20 people here on campus. Is that what all groups are like, or is that what all college students are like? You don't know. It's tough to prove. So conducting multiple cases, studying people over time will help reduce the problem there of external validity. So I think some things you need to worry about. And then lastly, you can read through this, some advantages, disadvantages of observational methods. You can, like right here, if things change quickly, you get to see things as they change. You see how people experience life. You can understand things that you may not have thought to ask. But problem is Hawthorne effect. Again, the Hawthorne effect is going right back here. Are people reacting to you instead of behaving as they normally would? It's tough to study large groups, so is what you do, is it generalizable? It can be very demanding, and sometimes you have to wait around for a while. I know some people want to study the effects of some factory on health. This factory was said to put out a lot of toxins in the air and pollutions, and people would get some breathing disorders and problems, respiratory problems from it. And so sometimes you just wait around for events to happen, and if the events aren't happening, then there's no one to observe or interview. So anyway, so please continue to ask me questions you have as we go over these slides, and get ready for exam 2.